Hello and welcome back. I am the Clay Golem. This is Foundry VTT, and in this video we're going to be looking at some traps, or at least trap mechanisms. Follow on from the previous one. So the previous video, of course, we looked at pit traps and we looked at tripwire traps, using Monk's active tile triggers to activate spells and bows and all sorts of things being fired from one location at your target. In this one, we are going to, or in this part of this video, it's going to be in two parts. This first part, we are looking at the classic Scooby-Doo-esque bookcase fireplace that spins, rotates, and allows the characters, the actors, to move through a wall. We're not using, or at least we don't need to use Monk's active tile triggers for this one, although we have got that installed, and I'll show you in a minute when we look at our little switch. This is all using a macro, but first of all, what does it do? So if I click on my little macro down here, it will rotate by 180 degrees our bookcase and fireplace. Now that's reasonably easy to do, okay? The tricky bit is what happens if we've got an actor Tharivol is actually activating it while he's there. There we go. So he moves with the bookcase and is now on the other side of the wall with Haley. So they're both there and they can both come back again. If I pop Haley on the other side of this and once again click that, it will rotate and you'll notice that they stay in their relevant positions. Tharivol stays on this end of the bookcase regardless of where it is. So they actually move correctly with the image, which is fantastic. But you'll also notice that Tharivol, if I press down here, he can't walk through that wall. So I'm trying to get him to move down to this square on the fireplace. He can't move through the wall because we do have walls. So we've got a couple of different interesting things happening here. First of all, we want to make sure this tile, when we click our macro, rotates. We also want it to detect if there are any tokens on this tile. If there are, rotate them as well, but they have to try and pass through the wall. So we need to get them to be able to pass through the wall. And there's a few different ways of doing it, but I had some trouble. So I ended up doing it a particular way. Now, if you know what macros are, you're writing your own macros, Gingergruff, I'm looking at you. You're going to look at this and probably go, this is a hideous mess, or there's a better way to do it, etc. I'm not good at macros. I can understand what a macro is supposed to do once it's been written, but I'm writing them from scratch, not really my strong point. And this is where you can use various forms of AI, chat GPT, etc. to help you and just ask it, I want a macro that does this. And it will build it for you, and then you can tweak it and say, oh no, actually I need it you to do that, I need it to do that in this condition, and it will build it for you. And the really good thing is it does annotate it for you as well. So this is mostly with my tweaks from ChatGPT. Right, so we want to rotate a specific tiles by 180 degrees, and I decided to take about 3 seconds. That seemed like a good speed. You can make it quicker, you can make it slower. We wanted to automatically disable the walls so that the tokens can move through those walls, but then put the walls back afterwards. Yeah, so let me show you what I mean. If we, once again, if I stick Haley on here and I have her, we got the walls on. When I click the macro, if you watch those walls, it disables those walls, moves Haley through them, and re-enables those walls at the end. So the macro is doing that for us, because that's part of the challenge, is how do I get my characters to move through the wall? Now you can use other methods, such as ensure that the token can pass through walls. You could delete the wall and replace it, etc. I found this was much easier, is to temporarily change that wall. So this stuff at the beginning, now I've got it set up very specifically for that tile. So I've used the UUID of that tile when saying this is the tile that's going to turn. You can use things like Tagger and stuff like that instead. You could have multiple different tiles that all react in the same way at the same time if you wanted to do that, if you've got some kind of complex trap or mechanism going on. But I haven't, I've only got it one. So first of all, it's going to check to make sure the tile actually exists. This is where it's setting 3,000 milliseconds. That's my rotation speed. So I can change that anytime I want. And I'm rotating it by 180 degrees. So whatever its starting rotation is, add 180 degrees to that. That's how I'm getting that flip. But you could do it 90 degrees, 270 degrees, whatever's going to work for you. Would recommend it's in, 90 degree turns. But your map is your map. So you will know what you need it to do. I need to work out how big my map is. Okay, so get the tile bounds, work out what the center is. I need to know the center of the tile, regardless of how big it is, because we're going to rotate around that center. Because if we rotate around one edge, it will look weird. But you may have a circumstance where you don't want it to rotate around the center. If you think of a door, it rotates around the hinge on one side rather than around the center of the door. Okay, so there are other ways you can do that. We need to find out which walls. I'm leaving this up here so that you can read it yourself. You can copy it. You can do whatever you need to do. Identify the walls that are going to be affected by this tile turning. So that's what this is doing here. It's looking for those walls. It does a quick check to see if either wall's endpoint lies inside of the tile bounds. So it's doing a little check there to make sure it knows which walls it needs to move. It's doing, as it says, a simple rectangle line intersect check. So it's checking to work out what that is for the various lines and stuff, and we'll send that back. That's fine. This is another little function here that is, or a couple of little functions here that are just working out where those things are, doing all the calculations. You don't need to understand what this does as long as you know, as long as it actually works for you. So it's going to save each wall's original condition. So whether the light can pass through it or not, whether a movement is permitted or not, etc. Okay, it's going to make sure it saves those states so it can return them to what they were originally. Okay, that's quite important. We're going to then find any tokens that are on the tile that we're going to rotate. So it's looking for that, it's looking for those, and it's going to give us back that information about those tokens that are on the tile. So you'll notice it works for one token, it works for 2 tokens, it will work for as many tokens that are on the tile. Sometimes you kind of do these things and you go, yes, it works, but as soon as I put a second token on, it won't, because you're only going, find the token rather than finding all tokens. Right, then what we're going to do, so this function here is the one that's actually about how to do the rotation itself. So you can see there's some calculations in here, some maths rotations. What it's saying is, I know I need to rotate it by 180 degrees, and I know you want it to do that over a 3-second period, so I've got to work out how fast to rotate to complete 180 degrees in 3 seconds. Okay, so a bit of maths in there. We also want to make sure that we're able to work out about moving the tokens in a similar way. Now you will notice that because I don't use rotating tokens, I don't use top-down tokens, my tokens continue to face the same direction when they turn. That's a choice. If you've got top-down tokens, you'd probably wouldn't want them to stay fixed rotation while they're moving. You'd probably want them to move as well, so they're facing the correct direction. So yours is, from that point of view, is a little bit simpler. Excuse me. What we need to do is we're going to wait to make sure things are actually completed. You can see we're waiting for the rotation and everything to be done. And then this bit at the bottom here is just finishing off. As you can see, this is going to restore the original wall movement, etc. And none of that actually happens. It does all of those calculations, and it's this bottom bit here that actually says, right, run that animate rotation function, which is what this is up here. So all of this bit, that is all part of the same function to actually make it happen. Everything else is calculating and working out which tile, which actors, which walls it's working all that out. This is what's actually making that happen, and that only runs when it gets to the very end here, so it calculates everything first. So quite simple, really nice little neat thing. I did have it a bit juddery at first, that just do with walls, so I did have to keep refining it a bit. Now of course you can add in all sorts of things. Of if you want to make this something like a trap, you could have that when you step onto this region it automatically triggers and it moves Hayley around, and then it deactivates the ability to do that. So you know, Hayley steps on here and it automatically moves her around, and suddenly she's on the other side of the wall and there's no way for her to get back. So if you want to use it like a trap, if you think they're going down a dungeon corridor, a member of the party or two, they trigger a trap and a big section of wall moves, rotates, they're suddenly trapped on the other side, away from the rest of the party. So you can use it to do things like split your party in labyrinths and things like that, just to annoy them. Or you can use it more like a secret door that I've got here. Let's bring Hayley back over this side. Just check our walls are all correct. So the other way that you can do this, if you want it like a secret door, you can put something in like a lever here. Now I would start with that hidden, and then once they, you know, if they complete their search, then they find the lever and then they can actually click it. So let's get Hayley to activate this lever. We can click on it. And there we go. Now Hayley's on this side. She can't reach that lever. So she's stuck. You could, of course, you could put a lever on the other side as well. I can click it because I'm in as the DM, of course, and make it go back again. So let's have a little look at this. It's just this is where we are now using Monk's Active Tile triggers to do this. So for my triggers, the setup, I've got any tokens are allowed, and they just need to click it. Okay, so I'm not worried about, I'm not worried about who does it and who clicks it. In this case, I'm happy for the players to be able to flick the lever themselves. If we look under actions, now there is some duplication here because I wanted to show you how you can do it through Monk's Active Tile triggers rather than through macro. Well, first of all, I've got it playing just a little sound, that little click at the beginning when they press the button. And now this one, this is where I'm using Monk's Active Tile triggers to change a wall or a door. I selected the wall that I wanted, and I've changed the movement restriction to none. So we've got the macro doing that, but this will do it as well. So if you're not using Monk's Active Tile triggers, obviously you can put it in the macro. If you are, and you're triggering it through Monk's Active Tile triggers, you can do it this way, and that will remove that wall. I'm then getting it to play the scrapey wood sound. It's not the perfect sound for this at all, but I didn't want to spend forever trying to find the perfect sound just for a demo. I then am running the macro. Now I am running the same macro, so obviously the macro is removing the walls and Monk's Active Tile triggers are, so it is duplicating in that, but I just wanted to show you that you can do that. So we're going to run whatever macro it is. That might just be the rotation, it might be the rotation with the characters, etc. I'm then asking it to wait for 4 seconds because I want to make sure that 3-second rotation is completed and my actors have moved before once again I update that movement restriction of that wall to normal. I mean, I can change it to anything, but of course in this case I want to change it to normal. Notice I'm not changing anything else to do with that. I'm not changing it to a door. Theoretically you could do. I'm not changing sight or anything like that, so it's staying opaque to the tokens. So really quite simple, and you just saw how that worked. And of course we can stick Tharivolt on the other side of that. Hayley can click that and they will both move. So really neat little thing to do. I'm sure you can think of hundreds of uses for this. Like I say, you can use it for secret doors, you can use it for traps. You can obviously, because it's just a tile, you can have any image you like. This is just as an example one. This is right next to a locked door. It's a bit silly location, demonstration purposes only. But you can use it to do things like Hayley's now in, if I lock that and the windows are non-openable, she's now effectively in an escape room and she's got to work out how to get out. So maybe she's got to find clues, she's got to find all sorts of things before she can eventually get the key to actually get out of the room. And of course you can put some kind of timing on that, because the room is slowly filling with water or with gas, or creatures are, you know, every round a new creature plops into the room, a giant centipede and things like that. You know, to add some jeopardy and a bit of time pressure. Whatever you like, there's lots of cool things you can do with it. So that is that version, and that is using that Monk's Active tile triggers. We're now going to jump over to look at a slightly different trap where we are only using macros, but we're using macros triggered by regions. So I'll see you in just a moment. Okay, for our next one, we are delving down into the bowels of Castle Ravenloft, because it's just a good thing. I haven't, excuse me a second, let me hide my tile again, there we go. So there is a part in Castle Ravenloft where you are wandering through the dungeons, and there is a corridor, and there is a chute trap. So when you walk onto this tile, if you haven't already predicted it, in other words, you haven't detected the trap previously, you step onto here, the floor gives way, you fly down a chute and end up in this prison cell here. So this is obviously slightly more complicated than just a pit trap, although it has elements of it. We want to move the token. So this one actually gave me a bit of trouble. First of all, we're triggering this from a region, so we're not using Monk's Active tile triggers for this one at all. So we've got a region here that I've got set up. Obviously the shape is just that one. The behavior is to execute our macro. Okay, so that's all it's going to do. Execute the macro. When a token enters this particular square, we've got the ID of the macro, which is the first one on my hotbar at the bottom there. We'll look at that in a moment. And this will work for everyone. So what does it actually do? Let's show you what it does, and then we'll talk about how it does it. So we walk along here, we haven't detected it, and immediately that happens. So it is setting off the trap, in inverted commas. It's showing this tile, so that they can see it's a chute, and then it's moving Tharivol all the way down to here where we want to be. Now, Tharivol can't go, I'm hitting up here, he can't go back up that chute. Because you go through effectively a door flap, which shuts behind you, you cannot climb back up the chute. So that's quite an important part that we needed. So the troubles I had with this one was to do with that wall collision stuff again. Now what you will notice, if I just drag Tharivol up the top here, watch his movement. When he moves onto this, he doesn't move on then go down. Oh, it's panned me over because I was too zoomed in. So watch him again. He cuts that corner. And that gave me a little bit of grief, because if I did the same trick where I turn this wall here and say you can move through that wall, it was saying, yeah, great, that's fine, but because he's cutting the corner, he was getting stuck on this wall. Now there's a couple of things you can do. You can extend that wall that becomes, you know, that walkable, movable, so he moves through it. You can do that if you want. Then he was getting stuck on the top of this wall, so I would have to do it for this wall as well. If they come from the other direction, I got the same problem, I would need to do the same thing. So what I actually decided to do for this is, you can see I've created one-way walls. So this one at the bottom here, rather than having this wall allow people to move through and then stop, I just made it a one-way wall. So he's allowed to move through it one way and he can't move back the other. That's a really easy way to do the bottom of that chute. Up the top here, again, he can't move up through that chute that way, but he can move down through this wall. So it allowed him to do it, and with this side one as well. So as he clips across the corner, he can move through these two walls, and that works fine. If you've got a little bit of grief, then absolutely you can extend that a bit, so if he's clipping across the corner. Now what I did try to do with the macro, and you will see in the macro, the bit that actually doesn't do what it's supposed to do, to be honest, I gave up because it works. Once it works, you don't need to refine it. And like I say, my macro skills are not brilliant enough to resolve this. I did try to get it to say, well, once you trigger it, make sure you move and center yourself before you do that. If I was using a tile instead of a region to activate it using Monk's active tile triggers, it's much easier. Because Monk's active tile triggers, you can get it to snap the token to the center of the triggered tile, then run the macro to do the movement and stuff. In fact, actually, Monk's active tile triggers, you can do this whole thing just using Monk's active tile triggers, because you can also teleport, in inverted commas, teleport, animated teleport. So it will move it from there to there, but it will show you the path, which is essentially what we've got. But I wanted to do this via macros to show you what you can do. So similar to before, ChatGPT to the rescue to give me a good solid starting point. So what this is supposed to do is snap the token to the grid square containing the target tile. And that's not what I wanted it to do. I wanted it to snap it to the center of the grid square that contains the region. And I just couldn't get it to do it because it's a region, not a tile. Somebody else, again, read the comments of this video, because there will be people saying, this is what you need. You should have done this, because there's lots of you out there who really know what you're talking about. But anyway, it should then confirm that it's done that. I just put a couple of bits of text in. You may have seen it pop up. Shopkeeper has aligned to the target grid square rat before teleporting, except that's a lie, he didn't. But I put that in there to part of debug. I wouldn't have that in there normally. I wanted to wait half a second. Now I asked it to wait half a second because I wanted to give it a chance to finish that movement before it then tried to slide him down. Like I say, it didn't work. Shows a teleporter effect tile. In other words, shows the chute. Then moves the token to the center of the target tile. So down here, I've got a tile where Tharivol is that I call the target tile. Okay, so we've got the region is an activation. It shows this tile here with the chute on it, but we're moving it to this target tile. Now Tharivol's standing over it, but that target tile is just a tile that is blank. So I've got my blank card. It's an invisible tile purely to have as a landing spot. So there's a lot of stuff in here it's not actually doing. So what tile do I want to reveal? What tile do I want to move the character to? We want to get the triggering token. So this is where it's saying, who was it that activated that region trigger? Okay, so we want to grab that so we know we're doing it with Tharivol and not some random other member of the party. We want to make sure we get the tiles and make sure that they do exist. Give an error if they don't. This is where I wanted it to snap the token to the grid containing the target tile, although, and that's the problem. The problem is it's still trying to do it to the target. That's to the target's tile, and it's like, no, want to snap it to the starting region. Like I say, I solved it, so I gave up. Didn't bother refining it further. Confirm the alignment in chat. This is where it then says, oh, yeah, you've been set to the right place, but this bit is not correct. And in fact, looking at it again now with fresh eyes, it's like, hang on a minute, it keeps saying target tile. It shouldn't be. That's target tile down here where Tharivol is, rather than snapping it to the region. So that's probably my bad, just overseeing, kind of going, well, it's not snapping it to the right one. No, it shouldn't be snapping it to that. If it's trying to snap it to that, it's not going to work because you're nowhere near it. I didn't say move to and snap it. I just said snap it, which you can't do. Want to show the effect tile. All that is doing is showing this chute tile, and then we want to move the token to the center of the target tile. So this target tile down here, that's where we're doing the move part. From wherever we are, move it to there, which is why it cuts that corner. Because we haven't said move. In fact, we could say move it to there, then move it to there if we wanted to do that, which would make that smoother. Absolutely, we could do that. So like I say, with any of these, there's multiple different ways you can do it. Just depending on your personal approach, your particular situation, etc. Move the token to the center of the target tile and make sure it's grid aligned. So make sure it snaps to the actual thing rather than, I don't want, hang on, wrong one. I don't want Tharivol, get off. I don't want Tharivol's token to end up like that. I want him snapped to the middle of the grid. So that's what that is, about snapping it to there. This is my wait 5 seconds before teleporting, which is interesting because step 5 is wait 5 seconds, but hang on a minute, before that we're doing the movement. So my macro is a mess. And it's where I've tried multiple different things and I've just not tidied it up properly and stuff like that. This is where we are actually doing the teleport of the token. So you can see we're waiting for that, and it says animate false, but it actually does animate it. And then at the very end there, it just says that it's snapped on there. So yeah, is it the best macro? Really, really not. And of course, when you're using something like ChatGTP, it will end up giving you a macro that might be a bit of a mess, especially if you keep tweaking it and asking it to change stuff. But if you get the right result and it works reliably, who cares? And I know there's somebody in the chat already halfway through a sentence, at least one, telling me why it bloody matters. And with my actual real world job head on, it matters. It's really important. This is Foundry. We just want to get it to work in a way that, is reliable for us. It works for the players. If you are nerdy about this, and that's not an offensive term, by all means, make it a perfect macro. Beautiful. And much respect for you if you have the skills and the talent to do that. But at the end of the day, for a lot of us aren't that. We don't have those skills. If it works, it works. And that is all that matters. Remember, what's the point in doing any of this? It's about so we can run a good game that flows well, preferably cutting down a lot of admin. Now, when I built Curse of Strahd, I didn't put any of that in. I didn't put this trap in. I didn't sort it out. Because why? Because all I've got to do is tell the player. When they get to there, I can hit pause, I can explain what happens, and I can drag their token down there. From a player's experience, that's fine. Absolutely fine. They don't need to see it animated. Now, okay, depends on your player group. They might be you might be running a highly automated group and everything else like that. But could you imagine me going through Curse of Strahd and getting macros written, beautiful macros written for absolutely everything? It took me 18 months to get the darn thing finished anyway. We'd still be working on it. So if you wish to do that, you absolutely 100% can. My live game, I've not got that in there. It's not a problem. Absolutely not a problem. And it also gives the opportunity for players to do all sorts of amazing things and interrupt the flow to make comments. As they're traveling down there, they might, say, oh, I'm doing this. They might have a magic item. They might have a reaction spell or something that they can cast that might interrupt this workflow of what's happening. Can't imagine they will, but if you automate too much, you rob yourselves of those opportunities, and then you have to go, oh, okay, well, you do such and such, I'll put you back again. By the way, when I'm in here, I can't walk through that wall north. I can walk south, I can't go back up again. So that's it. Just a little bit of an introduction to using macros and how powerful they can be, and they can do really smart stuff. It's just a case of your individual needs. And of course, if you are using things like this slide macro a lot, then yeah, tidy it up, get a really good one, and then you can use that macro and you can have it triggered by stepping on a region or triggered by a monk's active tile trigger to run your macros and stuff like that. And then you can reuse the same macros. You can end up a whole bunch of macros and go, this type of trap, it works like this. In the first video, when we looked at pit traps and we did it all through monk's active tile triggers, we 100% could do that all with a macro, if that's what we wanted to do. Monks makes it so much easier for us lay people to be able to put those things together, which is absolutely brilliant, because effectively it's kind of doing the macros in the background. He's done all the hard work for us, so we just can do the point and click stuff. But you 100% can do a macro. If you use a lot of pit traps, you might want to get your perfect macro for those pit traps, and then you could just dump that pit trap out as many times as you want, knowing it's going to run your macro exactly the way you want your traps to work. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, listening to my end of video rambles, which is a thing. It's always been a thing. It probably always will be, and I'm still doing it. Leave a like, leave a comment. If you're not subscribed, please do so. It really helps out the channel. Of course, you hear that in every single video you've ever watched on YouTube, I am sure. But seriously, it does make a huge difference if you're subscribed, if you like, if you leave a comment. Really, really helpful. Hope this has been helpful for at least some of you to give you an idea of what you can do, even if you're not trying to do exactly this. And I will see you in the next one. Take care now.